Hello and welcome to today's skill acquisition screencast. The focus is on types and uses of feedback with a specific focus on knowledge of performance, knowledge of results. So as always, we need to be able to describe the feedback type, we need to be able to give an example, and we need to then be able to give advantages and disadvantages. Now, really important that we understand the process we're going to go through when we are giving advantages and disadvantages of feedback. It's an extremely popular exam question. Evaluate the different types of feedback or give advantages, disadvantages, whichever way they're going to word it. But really important for today's session, we're going to be looking at knowledge of performance, knowledge of results. Now, whenever we evaluate, when we're talking about practice, feedback, guidance, whatever, usually we're going to start with the stage of learning the feedback is most effective for. Now, when we talk about knowledge of performance and knowledge of results, these two types of feedback are anomalies in a way. Because when we evaluate, or when we give the advantages of both knowledge of performance and knowledge of results, we can get marks for saying that both of these feedback types are effective for both stage of learning. Now, if we're going to do this effectively, we need to justify why it's effective for the different stages of learning by using some specific terminology or some specific advantages. On top of that, if we can make reference to confidence and motivation and how that can be increased or decreased, depending on the type of feedback, that will also give us a really good foundation to be able to score highly when we evaluate feedback types. So let's start off. Let's have a look at the basic descriptions and examples then. So if we start off with first up, I've put down a nice little picture here. So if I looked at here, knowledge of performance then. So if I say before we look at the description, you might see here I put a little example of a coach. A coach here is watching a shooting exercise in football and he's looked over and said, "Good shot with your laces." So if feedback is knowledge of performance feedback, okay, it is information about technique. Now you should be able to tell that from what this coach has said here, because he said good shot, not just good shot. That's not specific enough. Okay, what he said is good shot with your laces. Now that is telling the performer information about their technique, because good shooting technique would often involve kicking the ball with the laces of your shoe or foot or boot. Okay, so that is why they've used that. Now I put into here just so you can have it as the example on there. A coach and a football player, they shot well because they use their laces. Okay, so I put that in there so you can see how it is. That is a technical coaching point, therefore it's knowledge of performance. Okay, information about technique. So really important. You have to make sure we get this translation right. Knowledge of performance is not information about performance. What it is, but you can't use that as a description. So it's information about technique, and that word is going to come up over and over again. Now the flip side to that, the opposite, the other type of feedback, if we have knowledge of performance, which is information about technique, the other type of feedback then is knowledge of results. Now knowledge of results is translated into information about the results. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just change that here. Information about the outcome. So if I can ask you to change that now and just add on, remove results because we do need to translate that. That's a mistake by me. So information about outcome of performance. Okay, so for example, seeing the shot go in a goal or scoring 3 goals in a game. So if I use this example down here again, if you're watching here, knowledge of results is information about the outcome. The outcome in this case, the ball went there, is in the goal. Okay, so this performer here can see that they have scored in the goal. Or they might have had, in this shooting game, knowledge of results, information about the outcome of this shooting drill could be that they had 3 goes or got 3 goals. So the 3 goals would be an example of knowledge of results because it's information about the outcome of performance. Okay, so from here then, as I said before, if we're going to evaluate this, we've got to stay the stage of learning it's effective for. As I said, both stages of learning are going to be effective for both types of feedback. We just need to make sure we can justify why using specific terminology and then make sure we apply it to confidence and motivation. So as we move on, knowledge of results will have results, information about results as its description on the slide. So just make sure you change it to outcome at all points. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Right, so from here then, let's start off with knowledge of performance then. So I'll keep this up here. So you've got all this information about technique, e.g. coach saying football player has a good shot because they've used their laces. That is information about the technique that's made it good. And it's really, really important type of feedback. So let's have a look at how this works. Okay, so I said to you, when we talk about our evaluation points, we're going to talk about stage of learning and then some specific justifications. Then we'll move on to confidence and motivation. Let's have a look at how that works then. Knowledge of performance, information about technique is extremely effective for cognitive performers because it tells them how to improve technique. So for example, if this person hadn't shot with their laces, they might have said, that's not a very good shot. You need to shoot with your laces. So if that quote mark there was, you need to shoot with your laces, this is extremely effective for cognitive performance because they don't know the technique yet. So it tells the performer how to improve their technique. So from that word technique there, it's effective for cognitive stage learners or beginners because it tells them how to improve technique. Now on top of that, it works in a very similar way for autonomous performers, but rather than telling them how to improve their technique, it's effective for autonomous performers because it allows them to refine their technique. So it might be a tiny little point, a tiny little coaching point. Okay, so for example, a coach might be saying, right, can you try, when you hit your laces, can you just try and curve around the ball a little bit? Okay, just to swerve it into the far corner. Now that allows them to perform, rather than telling them they need to use their laces, an autonomous performer knows that, but it might be just something about hitting around the side of the ball so that this player here, if you tell them, just hit to the side of the ball so that you can curve it into that bottom corner, okay, into the side netting. Now that's showing how, knowledge of performance or information about technique can help autonomous performers refine their technique rather than improve it in the first place. Okay, or just understand how to perform the technique. On top of that, what else is good about knowledge of performance? Now, this is really, really useful, I think, because often what you will happen is, say, for example, somebody tries to shoot the ball here, and the player hits it, and it goes straight to the goalkeeper. Okay, but they've hit it with their laces, it's gone through the ball, it's gone at a real nice speed, so it can be really useful when the ball doesn't go in, it's not successful, but the technique is good. Okay, so if the outcome is bad and the technique is good, it's really useful feedback to give because somebody might get a little bit demotivated when they look at a shot and it doesn't go in, it hasn't scored a goal. So it can really help when the technique is good, but the performance is that, or the outcome is pretty bad. Okay, final thing is, of course, if you get things right, if you get kind of knowledge of performance feedback, e.g. people are telling you about your technique and it's good, it can really increase your motivation and confidence. Now, I'm sure you could understand this is going to be very similar to what we looked at with extrinsic feedback. Okay, so of course, knowledge of performance, information about technique can be, the example we've looked at is in extrinsic form. We talked about the coach a little bit here. So if I said to you on here, the big problem with knowledge of performance feedback is if it is inaccurate. If it's inaccurate, that can lead to a lifelong of poor technique or a habit forming whereby performance is poor. On top of that, it does not. If you're just saying here, this performer say good shot with your laces, as the coach has said here to the performer, it doesn't provide feedback on results or outcome of the performance. Okay, and autonomous stage learners, if they're elite performers, are often judged by how successful they are, so whether the results are high or not, how many goals they scored, for example. Okay, so although this is really good for technique, it doesn't provide feedback on outcome. On top of that, too much knowledge of performance can lead to information overload for cognitive stage learners. For example, first time this player has had a shot here, they're in the cognitive stage, and the coach is saying, right, you need to get your non-kicking foot by the side of the ball, you need to get your head over the ball, you need to kick through your laces, you need to try and aim, make you follow through straight away. That cognitive performance thinking, gee, I haven't got a clue what he just said. So if you give too much knowledge of performance, it can lead to information overload. And of course, if that happens, any of these disadvantages take place, obviously it can lead to a decrease in motivation. You could also add in confidence on there just to be safe. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that works. It works a lot off the word technique. Stages of learning, both of them, and I've tried to link to both stages of learning onto here as well, just to help you remember that this process of evaluation then reduces the load that you've got to remember. Okay, so moving on then, let's have a look at knowledge of results. So, as we know, knowledge of results, information about the outcome, if you can just change that. So, I've said over to here, what does that mean? E.g., this performer here sees the ball go in the goal. Okay, really, really good for that. I've scored 3 goals in a game. So, let's have a look at what this is. So, what might the advantages be? So, we know we're going to talk about stage of learning. Why is knowledge of results vital for a cognitive stage learner? Well, the reason why it is so important for somebody who's just beginning is because if they don't get knowledge of results, e.g., seeing that ball go in the goal, they don't know if they're successful or not. It's the only way when you start performing things by seeing the outcome of the performance, e.g., the ball going to goal. It's the only way you know if you're successful. So it's effective for cognitive stage learners because it shows them if they are successful. Okay, so that is your first one there. On top of that, it is also effective for autonomous performers. Okay, why is it effective for autonomous performers then? Because it is based often around statistical, objective, factual data. Okay, so for example, let's say we've got 2 things now. We'll keep this idea of shooting. So it's effective for cognitive performer because it allows them to see if they're successful. Ball's gone in the goal. If you're an elite performer, it's effective for you because it gives you the statistics on how you're performing. For example, okay, I got 3 shots on target out of 5, okay, or I scored 2 goals off 3 shots on target. Now that is hugely important for autonomous or elite or professional sports people because they are judged on statistics, objective, factual information. It is how they are judged as performance indicators. So hopefully you can see how that works. So maybe put a little example in there, e.g. a striker scoring 3 goals out of 4 chances or something like that, so you can see how that works. Now of course, as always, if this information is good, if this statistics objective, if the ball, or if for a cognitive stage, if it has gone into the goal and they can see it successful, this can be really positive for motivation, and indeed you could add on confidence on here. But as you can see, I'm sure, if you don't get it in the goal or you don't score very often, it can have the reverse. So let's have a look then. First up, disadvantages of knowledge of results. So if we are too focused on the outcome of performance, e.g. how often we are successful, okay, there are some problems. Problems are, it does not improve understanding or technique. So just because, let's say for example, these young people here, say it's a young 5-year-old, they go and shoot the ball and the ball goes in the goal, luckily every time. They kick it, they toe poke it, they might even pick the ball up, run up to it in their hands and throw it into the goal. Now, in terms of results, the ball's gone in the goal. The outcome is the ball is in the goal, but it doesn't improve understanding the technique because they don't know how it got there, okay, or they don't understand why it got there. So that's something you can have. It does not improve understanding or technique. Sometimes it can be too focused on statistics. It's more concerned with the numbers that you have got successful rather than the technique that helped you got there, okay, which can encourage incorrect stimulus response bonds. Okay, and finally, it can lead to a decrease in motivation and confidence if you have unsuccessful outcomes, e.g. you don't score many attempts when you're trying to shoot in football, for example, e.g. missing all 10 shots on goal and going wide, okay, and that can lead to a decrease in motivation and confidence, particularly for cognitive stage learners. Okay, so if we look onto there, hopefully you could see how that works. Please make sure you are using good questions to interrogate your notes on this, particularly the advantages and disadvantages.